Well, welcome to Club Soda webinar this evening, 28th of January 2018. My name's Ray Ritchie and I've been sober for 3 years, which is a total of 1,127 days today, I calculated, and that's after a decade or so of repeatedly quitting drinking, only to resume again. So tonight's topic is the end of January. Do you stay dry? And this is going to draw on my experiences of continually trying to stop drinking and then not being able to do that. So trying to stop drinking, and it's also quite timely, I think, for the end of dry January. So a lot of people have quit at this period of time and are now wondering maybe what to do and whether to go back to drinking again or not. And the structure I'm going to take for the next maybe half an hour or so is to tell you a little bit about my story, including the factors that made me stop drinking and those that made me then start again, followed by some reflections on moderation versus abstinence and thoughts to consider if you're trying to decide what to do at the end of this month. And finally, I'll be addressing any questions that come up. So if you do have any questions, please fire away in the little box and I'll try and answer them at the end. So who am I? As I said, my name's Ray Ritchie and I've been sober for 3 years, or just over 3 years now. And during that time, I found that whenever you say that you've actively quit alcohol, it opens up the floodgates for people, that's like friends, family, acquaintances, even relative strangers, will start to tell you about their relationship with alcohol and the concerns that they have. Sometimes it's concerns maybe about other people and their drinking, but often it's concerns about their own drinking behaviour. And it's only since I've stopped drinking that I've realised how many people have a really troubled relationship with the demon drink. And I sometimes wonder if maybe I'd known this before when I was drinking, how many other people also struggled, that maybe my own journey into sobriety might have been a little bit easier. But because now I'm so aware of how widespread concern about alcohol consumption is, and because I'm convinced about the benefits of sobriety, I'm really always very keen to share my experience more widely, and that's why I'm really happy to be here tonight. As a freelance writer, what I do all day, sobriety is something that I talk about regularly in my work, and I've written both personal accounts of stopping drinking and also talked more generally about alcohol. I'm really proud. Last year when Club Soda had their amazing alcohol-free drinks festival, I was able to write an account of that for Grazia magazine, and that was really exciting and really great to be able to feature the work of Club Soda, which I know many of you appreciate. So to give you a bit of my story and a background to my drinking habits, gosh, this was so hard to write and put down in my notes to really reflect on this. So, you know, as an early teen, I'd have an odd drink like a lot of people do, you know, a glass of wine at Christmas, or I'd be allowed, you know, an alcohol off on my birthday. Maybe if I went out with friends, you know, we'd sneak a couple of drinks. And then at the age of 15, I had this strange revelation that maybe I shouldn't drink and that actually alcohol was no good for me. And it's one of those things I look back now, like 20 years later, and think, why didn't I listen to that voice a bit more strongly? Why didn't I follow my gut intuition? And I did for a little while. I had a period where I didn't drink at all. My friends were starting to drink, and you know, I just didn't. And they thought it was a bit odd for that, but it was one of those things. Then I decided that I would actually drink. And then for the next few years, so my late teens, my early 20s, I went out and got drunk a lot. And it's when you look back and you think, well, who didn't at that age? I was a student, a lot of my friends were doing the same thing. You could go out, you know, every night of the week at university, you know, even on a Monday, you could go and have a really cheap night and get absolutely legless. And because of that, I think it's quite hard to say when my relationship with alcohol became really problematic and when it started to differ from what is normal for that age and stage of life. But certainly by 22, I was living in a new city, all alone, didn't know anyone, and by that point I was drinking all bets were off. I drank a lot, and I knew I was drinking a lot, and didn't really care. It just seemed, you know, a fun thing to do, and it helped me cope when things were difficult. It was fun, and it was a way of meeting people. But because I didn't have anyone around, you know, the usual sort of, I didn't have that kind of support network to maybe say, things are getting a bit, you know, maybe a bit too heavy here. And then at 23, I discovered the work of the amazing journalist Caroline Knapp, and I'm sure many of you know her. Caroline was an American journalist who wrote an amazing account of her alcoholism called Drinking, a Love Story. And a lot of people credit that with helping them maybe come to terms with their own dysfunctional relationship with alcohol. And that was certainly the case with me. It terrified me how much it resonated when I read that book. So, and I would talk about it with friends, people who were also heavy drinkers, and say, I've read this book and it's amazing, and talk about it. A lot of people say, no, it doesn't ring true for me, I don't get it. And that was another warning sign that maybe other people drink heavily, but it wasn't a problem. Whereas for me, it really always felt like it was difficult and causing problems. It was something that always sort of niggled away. Like I say, there was warning signs that maybe this wasn't really a good thing for me to do. And from that point, from reading Drinking, a Love Story, I went into a cycle where I would continue, I'd be swearing off alcohol. I'd say, I'm never drinking again. And then I'd resume drinking again, days later, sometimes weeks, and sometimes months. I could go, I'd go periods of 6 months at a time without drinking, and then something would happen, and I would go back on the top. And this continued until I was about 32. So that's 9 years, nearly a decade of this continual ping pong between drinking and not drinking, drinking and not drinking. It's tiring and difficult, and you're just trapped. You're just trapped in this going round. And well, why am I doing this again? And then you feel like, oh, it's fine. I'll just have a glass of wine. It'll be okay. So what were some of the factors that made you stop drinking every time? And I'm sure a lot of this will resonate with a lot of people. One of them was pressure from others. That's undoubtedly a big factor. So sometimes people express their concern, maybe about my health or my safety, if I've perhaps done something. I used to get myself into a lot of scrapes. And people would say, oh, maybe you need to drink a little less, and then you wouldn't quite end up making these mistakes or doing these silly things. Sometimes it was more from a health basis, like it can't be good for you, how much you drink. Sometimes people come into me drinking out of sheer annoyance. At one point I had a boyfriend, and on one night out, I almost got into a fight with some people on the next table because I decided to just go over and drink their wine, because they had wine and we'd run out of wine. And on the same evening, then walking home, I decided to flag down a police car because I thought it was a taxi. And suffice to say, the next morning we did have a little argument about my drinking levels. And to prove to him that it wasn't an issue and that I could stop any time I wanted and it really wasn't a problem, I said, oh, I'm not drinking then. I'll quit drinking, which I did for a while, just in a vain attempt to prove that I was in control. Another factor in why I stopped drinking would be embarrassment. And again, this is one you hear over and over. And I think embarrassment, I mean that in the full spectrum of maybe a little bit of a funny story that's embarrassing to full on outright shame at what I'd done. So yeah, I do things that I really regretted afterwards. And as I say, put myself in maybe some risky situations. And also, like with many others, alcohol could wreak havoc in my personal life, but also in my professional life too. And I put things in jeopardy that now I look back and think I'm very lucky that there weren't more consequences of my behaviour. I did things that I was really ashamed of, and that really chipped away actually at my sense of integrity and dignity. On one occasion, I got so drunk on a work night out, a colleague called for an ambulance. And then when we were in casualty, a bit later on, they gave me one of those little cardboard hats in case I was sick. And I decided that I was going to impersonate Liza Minnelli and use this little cardboard hat. I thought it was like a hat. I was going to be Liza Minnelli and use this hat as a prop and recreate some songs from Cabaret. And I can sort of laugh about it now, like a decade on. It still really makes me cringe, and I feel so ashamed about the waste of NHS resources and the idea that I could have ended up on like some kind of drunken Manchester programme. And I can only laugh now. I think, well, that's not going to happen again because I'm sober. One of the other factors that made me quit drinking over and over, and in the end was a major factor in me quitting drinking, is mental health. And again, I think this is something that a lot of people recognise. So during the 9 years that I ping-ponged between quitting booze, getting back on booze, quitting booze, getting back on booze, I suffered periods of really poor mental health. And it was often during those times that I was most acutely aware that alcohol was not helping the situation. And not only was it not helping, it was making things worse. And that happens for a lot of people. You drink because you have a problem. And then it may feel like it helps. Maybe it does in the short term, sometimes, occasionally. But actually, in the long term, it doesn't help. And then alcohol becomes a problem in itself, it only compounds the other problems that you have. And I think all these factors combined, so the pressure from other people, the embarrassment I was feeling, mental health problems, all of these things were combined to make me absolutely terrified about my relationship with alcohol. And rightly so, really. Like, I knew that it was in control of me and I was never in control of it. And deep down, I had this real sense that the issues in my life were not going to be resolved while I continued to be drinking. And I thought, no, I had to quit booze for good if I really, really wanted to address these issues. The only problem is, as before, I was very good at drowning out that little warning voice. So, with a bit of lager and wine, I could ignore that voice at all. And inevitably, I always did end up starting drinking again. So, what did make me start drinking? Despite concern of others, the embarrassment and the mental health issues, what made me start drinking again? Partly it was that fear, the fear I mentioned. So I was frightened about what alcohol did to me, but I also felt really ill-equipped to deal with them if I wasn't drinking or the things that were there. So drinking caused problems, but it was also a way of blocking out those problems. And it went from being the problem to being the solution, and then being the problem again, around and around in the same vicious circle. It was also a way of rebelling against others. So the times where I maybe quit drinking because I wanted to try and make someone else happy, there'd come a point where I'd end up just kicking back against that. And however, I'd make these really sincere commitments at the time, and I'd say to Mom, yeah, I'm going to quit. I'm aware it's a problem. I'm going to quit. And I would really mean it in that moment that I said that. I really don't think that long term you can quit drinking purely to make somebody else happy or to please someone else. So my own desire to have a drink would win out in the end, and would win out more than my love for that other person, because I think my love of booze top trumps all other relationships, and that's a really hard thing to admit. Even to yourself, it's really hard to say, but I think it's really true. Maybe it's not true for everyone, but it was certainly true for me, and that is part of the reason why, in the end, abstinence was the only way for me. So in the same way my commitment to trying to please other people would fade with time, so does embarrassment. So the morning after a shameful incident, we all know this feeling, you wake up and you're like, what the hell did I do that? Remorse, recrimination, but that doesn't stay with you to the same intensity. So sometimes it'll be gone by the end of the day. Sometimes it might take a few more days, or even if it was just something really bad, a few weeks. But eventually, all of the things I did didn't seem as bad once the time had passed. And even if they seemed a little bit bad, they didn't seem bad enough to warrant a life without alcohol. So I'd think, oh, well, I won't do that again. It'll be fine. And a big part of something that played into that also was I had a very strong misplaced confidence in my own ability to moderate my drinking behaviour. So after a period of not drinking, whether it was a few days, a few weeks, or as I say, these periods where I maybe drink for a few months, I'd become far too cocky, and I'd really believe that because I'd not drunk for that length of time, therefore that was a sign that I was able to moderate what I was drinking. So I'd think, well, I didn't drink for 6 months, therefore I can have a glass of wine because I clearly don't have a problem, and this time I'll be able to keep it under control. This time, I always think, this time it's going to be different. And I think it was going to be different despite all evidence to the contrary, that before I'd maybe quit drinking for 6 months or however long, and then gone back to drinking, and then gradually I'd just never be able to moderate. I'd have maybe one glass of wine initially, but within 6 weeks or 6 months of that, I'd be back drinking heavily. And one of the things that I think I now know after, like I say, like a decade of going around in this cycle, was that being able to go without alcohol for a certain period of time, however long, is no indicator that you're actually able to moderate your drinking. Being able to abstain is very different from being able to moderate. And I think not being able to make that distinction is something that tripped me up, and it trips a lot of people up. I think it's really fundamental to whether to how basically your relationship with alcohol can be in the future. And I think the ability to moderate versus the ability to being able to abstain really affects whether you can stay dry or not, or whether you should try and stay dry or not. So moving on to think about that, at the end of January now, a lot of people have done dry January as a challenge and are wondering maybe what to do. Are you going to stay dry when February starts? And I think some of this, something to reflect on is your motivation for doing dry January in the first place. So some people, their motivation is curiosity. You know, it seems like a challenge. They want to know if they can do it, and they have a go and they find that they can. Or sometimes they find they can't. It was a lot harder than they thought, but you know, that was just a curiosity. In the same way people think, can I do a marathon, or could I do veganary? They have a go. Other people do dry January for health reasons. So everyone enjoys this at Christmas. And it's kind of natural in a way, an impulse to think, right, I'm going to get back on it. January, want to reset, I want some healthier habits, and not drinking for a few weeks is part of that. So they may quit for the month, and then they start again. And, you know, it's no odds. They only did it, excuse me, because, you know, they wanted to maybe kickstart a healthier plan. I think similarly, for a lot of people, dry January is a really great chance. They maybe have developed some bad habits around alcohol, and maybe they feel they're drinking too much or too regularly, and dry January gives them a chance to have a break, you know, to stop that habit. And kind of like, as with being healthier, a reset. And you might feel like after dry January, fine to return to drinking, but it's a way of going back to drinking less than you did before, and you're totally fine with it, and nothing's really an issue. But I think for some of us, that is an unimaginable situation, or it's simply impossible to imagine or believe that we can go back to drinking in a way that was different to before. And I think it takes a lot of soul searching and a lot of contemplation to know which camp you fall into. So yeah, as I say, some people, 4 weeks off, it just, you know, resets, recalibrates. They can go back and they'll be able to moderate, even if they drank heavily before. For others, we could quit drinking for the whole of January or February, or even January, February, March, or January to the following January. And it wouldn't matter, because the moment we start drinking again, any concept of moderation goes out of the window. And for some of us, I think life is like that. It's all or nothing. You're either sober or you're drunk. And I think it took me 9 years of going round and round in this vicious cycle of behaviour to realise that I just can't moderate. And this is something that you encounter when you tell people you don't drink. They go, oh, can't you just moderate? Can't you just have like one glass, or, you know, 1 or 2 glasses, or whatever level they think is, you know, a reasonable level to drink? Can't you just do that? And no, I have tried so many times, and I just can't do it. And there are other people who are just like me. Until if I drink, I will always drink too much. That's the truth. I wish it was another way. I've tried to make it another way, and it's just not. And I think, yeah, I am definitely not alone in that. So if you've done dry January and you're now wondering where to go from here, maybe ask yourself also that same question, if you truly believe that you were able to moderate your drinking. Being able to go, as I say, being able to go a month without a glass of wine or a pint of beer is not the same thing as being able to go out next Friday night and just have 1 or 2 of those drinks. And one way to figure out whether you really think you can go back on the booze but just moderate and not just go back into a crazy cycle of drinking. Good evidence for that is your own behaviour. Your own behaviour up till now is a good guide as to whether you can moderate. And I would suggest that a lot of people who've turned to maybe a group like Club Soda can't moderate, because that's why we're looking for support and help with our drinking in the first place. So maybe you haven't spent 9 years wrangling with this as I did, but there's probably plenty of evidence on your life. Have all your previous efforts to moderate failed? What makes you think that this time will actually be different? And ask yourself honestly, like, what have you learned about alcohol that could really help you change? Maybe you have learned some lessons and got some systems in place that will allow you to drink in a moderate way that feels good for you and doesn't feel like alcohol is going to be problematic. But really, really search for that. And don't let a month of abstinence fool you into thinking that moderation will be easy. Because remember also that once you have that first drink, the rational choices that we make when we're sober are much harder to implement. So, and this is the thing that I would always do in the past. When you're sober, you think, right, I'm going to go out and I'm going to have like 1 glass of wine, maybe 2. Obviously, the moment I've had 1 glass of wine, that kind of level of self-control and soberness goes out the window, and you just can't make that choice. So then it'd be 4 glasses, and then I think, oh, get another bottle, why not? Because I'm not sober anymore and can't make that kind of sensible decision. And then, inevitably, I find myself waking up, recrimination, remorse, oh, wow, back on the same cycle. So maybe do you need to try dry February as well as dry January? Is it worth just maybe giving it another month, seeing how you can get on? What about dry March? We pick January as an arbitrary month. You can do any month you like and make it dry without it having to be a commitment to being forever. Maybe think about, could you pursue a dry 2018? Is that a challenge that you could do? Or even just thinking, could I do February the 1st dry? Do I have to just think, oh, it's the end of the month, I'm just going to go back to drinking? So think about that. Could it be a day, another month, or the year that you maybe try and abstain further? Are you on course to untangle some of the issues that lie behind your drinking? That's something else to think about. So think about, if you go back to the bottle, would that help or hinder the kind of discoveries that maybe you've made over the course of dry January? Another thing I think to ask yourself is, does going back to the bottle or the glass feel exactly like that? Does it feel like you're going backwards? Backwards around the same cycle that you've probably trodden before? Do you want to be in this same position? Do you want to be in the same position again next January? Will you look back and think, actually, I wish I'd made a bigger change now, at the beginning of this year? Think about how you're going to feel by next New Year, next Christmas, the end of next January. Would it feel amazing to have a year of sobriety under your belt? Or will you be thinking, oh God, I need to do dry January again because my efforts to moderate across 2018, they really, really did not work. So to bring this together in way of conclusion, I wanted to refer to someone else who probably speaks more eloquently about these issues than I do. And that's Gretchen Rubin. I'm sure many of you may be familiar with Gretchen Rubin. She's an American writer, and she discusses happiness, habits, and human nature. And in her work, she talks about something that she calls freedom from French fries. And that's the freedom that comes with abstaining from something entirely, rather than the constant wrestling about how much to have, when to have it, and when to stop. And this is taken from some words of her sister, who is addicted to French fries, chips, as we call them here in the UK. She loves chips, and she found that was becoming a problem because she'd try and cut down on when she had chips. And then it was this constant thing like, oh, how much is too big a portion? Do I have them tonight? When do I have them again? And she just felt like she was trapped, and like her love of French fries was becoming bigger than it should be. So now she just doesn't eat them. And rather than seeing that as a problem, she actually sees that as being a freedom. She thinks of herself as being free from French fries rather than deprived of French fries. And for me, that's the difference between moderation and abstinence. So going without alcohol may not be easy, but it does actually bring a certain kind of freedom, particularly if you've been trying and failing at moderation for nearly a decade. Like my heroin Caroline nap, in the end there was nothing that could be done except to end my love affair with alcohol permanently. Thank you for listening. I'm going to switch off now. Thanks everyone. Goodbye.